So as far as the Patriot movement, and that's what LWN is, we are part of many patriots out there searching for the truth and delivering the news like it should be delivered. All right, LWN for all your gold and silver needs, for your 401ks, your pension funds, your retirements. If you'd like to flip those over into a self-directed precious metals IRA, Miles Franklin Precious Metals Investments. Don't forget, LWN is now your personal broker for Miles Franklin. You can reach out to me at 1-800-822-8080 using promo code libertywarriornation. Or you can reach out to me via email at lwnreloaded@gmail.com. This week's specials brought to you by Miles Franklin Precious Metals, the 2022 Silver Krogerund. While supplies last, only $3.99 over spot. We also have the Kilo Valcami bars, while supplies last, only $2.99 over spot ounce. These are 1 kilo ounce bars. It's $2.99 over each ounce, spot ounce. You can reach out to me at lwnreloaded@gmail.com. All right, welcome, America. Welcome back to LWN. We have our weekly update from Miles Franklin, and I have Andy with me here in the back room. So I'm going to go ahead and invite Andy to come on screen with me. And we're going to talk about the updates that are so important. I feel they're important, at least for myself personally, to keep in the know for what's going on. We're going to talk about the Fed. We're going to talk about gold and silver. We're going to talk about the things that Andy sees transpiring, not just here in America, but around the world. So good evening, Andy. It's good to have you back here at LWN. I'm sure you're probably a very busy guy, so I appreciate the time.
Oh, it's good to be here, Mike. It's great to be here. Yeah, it's busy, but never too busy for you, and appreciate the opportunity to come back and look forward to our chats.
Oh, absolutely. So, I've said this, I think it was the last show that we did, that sometimes the information that you've put out, it just takes a foundation of knowledge. So, having you on a regular basis, I think, is the best for the listeners, because they get a chance to really let this stuff soak in, and then they go out and do research and they start seeing the same things that we're seeing. Because every time you bring information to LWN, either I've already read it in some of the news articles that are being put out, or I'll read it the next day or a couple days after. So it's very important for the listeners to go out there and do some of their own research.
Yeah, well, it's hard, Mike, because you have to dig in a way that is, it takes a considerable amount of effort, in the respect that the mainstream media doesn't touch on much of this information until it's too late. And maybe that's part of the reason why most investors don't succeed in investing, because by the time the information travels to them, the big money, who's closest to the information, has already repositioned in a way that allows them to take advantage of ups and downs. And there's always opportunity no matter what the environment. And I think it's being closest to the information. It's think about it. I mean, if you know the play, it's if you know the play, you can be reactionary, proactive in your decisions, and position yourselves in a place that has no competition, that is not being crowded out by the information traveling at the speed of light the way that it does nowadays to the public that would make those trades or those maneuvers impossible to do if everyone was rushing through the revolving door at once. And I remember when I was a kid, there was a Who concert. Don't remember where it was, but I remember people were trampled, all running through the doors at the same time. People died. And I think that's kind of the example. The smart money, well, they got in before the stampede and sit in front row with a cocktail in hand, waiting for the concert to start. That's kind of the analogy here. And I don't mean to disrespect the deceased in any way. It just simply as an analogy that people will get trampled in what's coming, and the big money is repositioning themselves in a way that dictates that they have been privy to the information, and you can see it in the positioning of the biggest money across the globe. There's no question that, to me, that is the biggest difference between those who succeed in investing and those who don't, at least at the highest levels. Some people get lucky. Some people trust their gut, listen to people like you and I, and make a move before the public does. But the big money, well, they're already positioned even before we're talking about it. And that's really the key to the whole story.
Last episode that you and I did together, we talked about herd mentality, and I brought it up in another show of mine. That's something that you and I discussed, and I said, Andy and I discussed about the herd mentality, and that's just another analogy that's parallel with what Andy's talking about. Is there's always going to be those few that get out ahead of everyone else. They get to the greener pastures, if you want to talk about cattle or sheep or whatever. But it takes a minute. They have to go out and test the waters before the rest of the herd will feel that it's safe and okay, and then they'll follow suit. But what Andy's trying to explain is the fact of the matter of, by the time that the herd mentality finally realizes that, hey, what they're telling me is the truth, what's coming down the pipeline is not good, and for me to make a shift and a move to protect myself, to protect my hard-earned 401ks, pensions, cash in the bank, whatever you have, by that time it very well could be too late. And that's what we're trying to get ahead of that curve here with all of you guys. So I'm going to ask Andy this question, because I've been paying attention a lot. My parents don't have much in the sense of like cable TV and streaming TV, and they don't have Roku, and they don't have Hulu, and they don't have all this stuff. They have basically, like, my dad's so cheap, God bless his heart. They have like an antenna on the house, and they get like digital local channels and local news and some reruns of Lizard Lick and Pawn Stars and all this stuff. But my point is this, Andy, as I'm sitting in there spending time with my parents and watching some of these shows, it's getting very, very prevalent. Prevalent, I think that's the word I'm looking for, to where a lot of the commercials that I'm seeing now on just this crazy hillbilly television, they're constantly doing commercials talking about protecting your 401ks, protecting your pensions, and what they are pushing is self-directed precious metals IRA. So here's the question for you, Andy. As I'm seeing this on hillbilly television, and people are seeing it on all kinds of streaming platforms and cable TV and influencers out there, telling people, hey, you might want to take a look at this information and make a move. You're seeing countries like Turkey, Russia, China, and all these other places purchasing uh, gold by the ton. Is this a signal? Because that's how I look at it. Is it a signal that we're seeing all these other places push people to pay attention and to save their 401ks and their pensions? Is it a signal that there is something coming and they're trying to wake people up, and there's still people asleep out there? What's your thoughts on those commercials and what they're putting out to the public?
It's ironic. Look, I've been talking about this stuff for going on 3.5 years, maybe four, um, long before it was considered fashionable. And the a lot of the companies that are talking about 401k and IRA precious metals, while timely and while uh, I don't know the word I want to use. Timely is it, but I think they're opportunistic. And most of the companies that are on TV talking about IRAs are, in many cases, not looking out for the best interest of the public. It doesn't mean that what they're saying isn't correct. The cost of advertising on Fox and on these shows is extraordinary. And most of the problems I see in this industry, in a federally non-regulated industry, are centered around companies that specifically focus on IRAs, and they're predatory. Now, I don't mean to cast a wide net, because I have never been one to lift myself up by stepping on others, but as God is my witness, the majority of all of the companies that have um, transacted business in a way that has cast a shadow on this industry settle or center around specifically focusing on IRAs. But let's answer that question in a different way. Who is really talking about what is really driving the thrust? You mentioned the central banks, and I think that's important to talk about, because look, the central banks globally have accumulated gold reserves this year at a pace that we haven't seen in almost 60 years, Mike, since 1967, when the US dollar was still backed by gold. And I ask people, what is the only asset that every central bank holds? And that is gold. You're seeing massive accumulations by the central banks. And certainly that, to me, is a far greater indication than opportunistic companies talking about IRAs. Now, I think precious metal IRAs are great. But to me, the real thrust, and again, the people who are buying precious metals IRAs, even though they're being talked about now on Fox News or whatnot, those people are the pimple on the elephant's ass. And, the public is still asleep at the switch, and have no ideas of what's coming after them. But when you realize that the central banks are massively accumulating gold, and doing so in a way that we haven't seen in almost 60 years, to me, that is really the indication. And doing so at a time when the majority of the public is or has no inclination whatsoever of precious metals being an intricate part of people's portfolio. It is still very early in the game. And when the public wakes up to what's happening in the marketplace, and I think we're getting close to that. I'll explain that in 1 second. When that happens, I think it's a whole new reality in this industry, where you will see a flood of people into this marketplace, because the alternatives, the places to put your money, are disappearing. Let me explain what I mean by that. If you look at, there's something called the 60-40 mantra, the 60-40 investment theory, that is very pervasive in this country. Most money managers employ it. Hedge funds, less hedge funds, let's say 401k administrators, pension administrators, people running insurance company portfolios, they use what's called a 60-40 allocation, where 60% of the assets are invested in stocks, 40% are invested in bonds. And the theory behind it, when I started in this industry, stocks and bonds were inversely correlated to one another. And it was called risk on and risk off. And as you work at a young age, you can afford to be a little bit more risky in your asset allocation in stocks because you have time on your side. If you screw up, you can still work and have time to get back to where you were. As you get older, those opportunities decrease. And so the theory is 60% in stock, risk on, 40% in bonds, risk off. And generally, if this were being tailored to an individual, the older we get, the more we move towards a larger allocation to the risk off, to the bond portfolio. But in general, a pension fund or an insurance company or a 401k administrator will just blanketly do 60-40 because you want to have a hedge against the risk on. Well, what's interesting is that over the last 12 years, 15 years, we've seen such a suppression of interest rates that that stocks and bonds have lost their inverse correlation to one another. So, in other words, as interest rates rise, both stocks and bonds get hammered. And you can see that in the 2022 numbers, where in 2022, the S&P 500 was down over 20%. And the 10-year Treasury was down 16%. It was the biggest one-year drop ever in the history of the Treasury market. And that's the risk-off portion of people's portfolio, because as the Fed has embarked upon quantitative tightening and raising rates. Now, before I even follow that train of thought, they told us that they'd start selling $95 billion a month. They have hardly done anything. And even if they were to do $95 billion a month, just based upon the amount of crap they've added to their balance sheet since the pandemic, 2020, it would take nearly 8 years, 7.8 years at $95 billion a month to shrink the Fed's balance sheet just back to pre-pandemic levels. We haven't even begun to see pain yet as these assets continue to fall off their balance sheet if they hold true to their word. But the point of it is simply this, that people will look at their statements and they'll be horrified just based on 2022 numbers, where the risk on portion of their portfolio is down north of 20%. Some stocks and like Apple and the FANG stocks, Amazon and Facebook and Netflix and Google, these stocks are getting hammered down 60-70% plus, but just an S&P index fund down over 20%. And then you look at your bond portfolio, which is supposed to be the hedge. Rates rose, stocks got clobbered, so did bonds. And so the 60-40 split that we see pervasive all throughout the United States investment matrix, the insurance companies, the pension funds, and think about those two: pensions, people's life savings; insurance companies, people's retirement, life savings; the 401k administrators, people's life savings. These funds are all 60-40 mantra. It was the third worst year for the 60-40 split on record. And as rates continue to rise, you'll see not only a continued deterioration in the equity markets, but also a continued evisceration of the hedge, that being the bond portfolio. And, this is an environment where people need to understand, as rates rise, the bonds in circulation fall. In other words, bond portfolios become worth less and less and less. And the reason is, if you bought a bond over the last few years, a 10-year Treasury paying 2%, If they're now being issued at 4%, why would anyone want your bond when they can buy it at 4, a coupon of 4% payment each year versus 2? So therefore, your bond that is paying 2% is worth much less than the bond that's coming out now that's paying 4. So it decreases in value. They move inverse of one another. As rates rise, bond prices fall. Not the ones that are being issued today, but all of the ones that were being issued. And over the last decade, we've seen interest rates at or near zero. And so rates, all of those bonds that have been accumulated by the pensions, the insurance companies, they need to invest their money somewhere to guarantee you a return on your annuity or your life insurance or whatever it may be. Those bond portfolios are getting hammered, and that is the risk off portion. If they continue to raise rates, you haven't seen anything yet. And so I think that when you talk about people making a move to gold and silver, I think you will begin to see this in 2023 as more of a idea that begins to permeate through the mainstream. Because when you look for alternatives to a traditional portfolio of 60% stock and 40% bonds, when you realize that interest rates have been suppressed for so long, have created massive distortions. You see, interest rates need to be set by the market, Mike, and not by the bankers. The interest rate should be set, in other words, if the market feels that there should be higher interest for the risk associated with owning something, then the market will dictate where those rates are, not the bankers suppressing those rates to create an illusion of prosperity. Now, why does that create an illusion of prosperity? Because as rates fall, you see your house price rise. You see your stock portfolio rise. Why? Well, your house prices go up because more and more people can afford to take more and more debt. If you have rates at 3% on a 30-year mortgage, you can take on greater debt than you can where we are now at 7.5%. In other words, the cost of money is 2.5 times what it was a year and a half ago. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about who can afford a house at, a $200,000 house at 3%, where your mortgage payment is like $600 a month, at 7.5%, your cost goes to $1,400 a month, $1,500 a month. It's a big problem, right? So you have just X'd out a lot of people who could afford that mortgage payment today versus yesterday. But if you keep rates low, more people can take on more debt. It increases people's ability to go into debt. It incentivizes them to do so. And when you talk about buying bonds that are yielding a very low rate of return, then it incentivizes them to go into the stock market and speculate. It incentivizes corporations within the ecosystem of the S&P 500, the companies that comprise the Dow Jones, to take on more debt, to build infrastructure, to even buy back their shares. And that was a big thing that we saw over the last few years, where companies would borrow money at next to nothing, make it look like they're productive, but in reality, what they were doing is buying their shares in the open market. So now they have all these shares on their balance sheet. But by doing so, it pushes the share price way up, makes them look like they're a really strong company. The executives make huge bonuses, and where are all their bonuses? Also in stock options. They're making a fortune. But now they got all these shares on their balance sheet, and if the economy gets crappy and the share prices start to fall, that means the share prices on their balance sheet start to fall too. This is a daisy chain of problems that we haven't even begun to see how severe it can get if rates continue to rise. And so, yeah, I think you'll see more and more people wake up to buying precious metals. And I don't think the companies that are talking about it specifically for IRAs are anything more than opportunistic. And good for them. That's what capitalism is. But look at what the biggest money in the world is doing. The central banks accumulating more gold than at any time in the past 55 years. And going back to 1967, when the dollar was still backed by gold, where countries would want to own gold because it was part of the system. So, yeah, it's a fair question, but I don't think the public has any idea yet what's coming. But It's getting closer. I do believe that their statements will certainly bear witness to that.
2008, that was a big year for America where the housing market collapsed and everybody went into tailspin, including myself. I owned a business, and overnight the phone stopped ringing, people stopped spending money. Things got very chaotic there for quite a while. Of course, fingers were always pointed to everyone but themselves. It's something that I try to let people know that, hey, this is on the horizon and you really need to excuse me, educate yourself and plan. Because in 2008, I woke up every day thinking, I could just go to work, and I can go to work and work harder and make the money that I lost yesterday. That's not the case. Once you start losing in a system like this, it's really hard, especially at my age and people that are older than me. You can't make that back.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. The 2008 and 2009 great financial crisis ended in 2010. Do you have any idea what the Dow Jones was at the end of 2010? Take a guess.
I'm gonna say somewhere around 18,000. I'm just taking a shot in the dark here.
10,600. And the Dow Jones has been in existence since 1896. 2010, at the end of the crisis, you had a Dow Jones of 10,600. Now, they had already started pumping money into the system. But when 2010 collapsed or ended after the '08 financial crisis, they started printing, the Fed printed money like a madman. And 10,600 at the end of 2010 was the high point ever. And so it took 114 years to get to 10,600 since the beginning of the Dow Jones. Thanks to the Fed expansion of its balance sheet by almost $8 trillion and zero interest rates from 2010 to 2022, 12 years, it made it to 34,500. That's a gain of 24,000 points. So in other words, it took 114 years to get to 10,000 and only 12 years to get an additional 24,000. Can you say illusion?
Yeah.
This is the illusion of suppression of interest rates and easy money. And so when you talk about distortions that have been created, those distortions are huge, and people, I don't think, quite grasp that when you mess with Mother Nature will come back with a vengeance. So, look, I think we have a long way to go on the downside to find a balance between rising interest rates and asset prices. Asset prices have been distorted. Price discovery has been distorted, Mike, in a big way by the suppression of interest rates and the easy money. And it all started after the great financial crisis. So when people talk about, well, if you just would have hung on at the end of 2008, you'd be fine. Well, yeah, that's true. But the Fed added almost $9 trillion to their balance sheet, and all of it in buying treasuries, which drops interest rates, which raises the prices of bonds, which increases speculation because rates are low. You can buy more house, you can take on more debt, you can buy that car that you really can't afford because you can go zero interest for 72 months. So you can, the companies will buy back their shares, they'll expand their business because the cost of money is nothing. And all of these years, people had expectations of a continuation of low interest rate environment. Not happening anymore. And now you're seeing those distortions trying to find symmetry between between the price of an asset and interest rates, the cost of money. And there's a long way to go on the downside if you realize that it took 114 years to get to 10,000 and 12 years to add 2.5 times that. So I would argue that you ain't seen nothing yet.
That's a crazy number. I didn't realize that. So thanks for sharing that with us here at LWN. 10,000 after 114 years, another 24,000 added to it in just 12 years. That seems almost impossible without manipulation of the market and manipulation of interest rates and everything else, which brings me to my next point in question. we talk about manipulation and the gold to silver, the gold to debt ratio, silver to debt ratio. I think that's what it's called. I might be off on my terms, but basically the manipulation of gold and silver, because when you look at the debt clock, it's showing that gold should be priced at, I can't remember what the last number was. I think silver was around somewhere around $50,000 an ounce or something like that. How impactful is that manipulation when it comes to these precious metals? Because some people look at it and say, well, silver's only worth 20 bucks an ounce, but that's manipulation. That's not the truth. So could you maybe explain how that manipulation works and how the debt clock is showing gold and silver having more value than what we're seeing on the COMEX?
The value that they're talking about is in direct relation to money creation, that they've created so much money and held down the price of metals because gold and silver aren't commodities like they want us to believe. They're money. They are a reflection of the health of the system. And as gold and silver go higher as monetary metals, it speaks to the frailty of the system, of the dollar, the kind of like the wizard behind the curtain, this big booming voice, and you look behind the curtain and it's a frail little guy talking into a microphone. But let's look at silver as an example. Look, it's an asset that is used globally, and it's unreplaceable in its uses. It has monetary qualities like gold, but it's also a strategic industrial asset. And because it's such a strategic and monetary asset, this is why I believe that the BRICS nations, as an example, have started buying, amongst other things, silver. This is one of the reasons why there is so much more physical demand manifested, Mike, in the drawdowns of the world's exchanges, where price is irrelevant. Now, I know that's hard for people to understand, but let me just put it to you this way. Because you're seeing such massive drawdowns in the London Metals Exchange and the COMEX, you're talking the highest of financial sophistication. The biggest money in the world who knows how to do this is drawing down the supplies on COMEX and the London Metals Exchange, the two biggest epicenters of supply across the globe. I think that the price will continue to be suppressed until there's none left. And when the price shoots up in a matter of moments, you'll understand that it's no longer in the weak hands, that the big money that has been using price as a tool of misdirection so that the biggest money in the world can drain the supplies. And when I talk about draining the supplies, the London Metals Exchange is a 140-year-old entity.
Yeah.
The amount of silver that they have on the exchange is the lowest ever since they started keeping records. On the COMEX, which is the price-setting mechanism of the West, of the world, really, the amount of silver that has been drawn down over the past 18 months is north of 75%. There's only 36 million ounces backing the registered category on COMEX. Those are the bars that are available for delivery. And the country of India imported over 300 million ounces of silver in last year. So, I always talk about the BRICS countries buying gold. India, as an example, realizes that silver is an incredibly important metal, not just monetarily, but industrially, and have imported nearly 10 times the amount of silver that is being held in the COMEX market, backing the price setting. Now, if you take all of the silver in COMEX, including the eligible category, and those are bars that are not for sale. Those are bars like in my COMEX depository, my Brinks depository. I'm not selling them. They're not for sale, or my clients own them. That amounts to about 300 million ounces, both eligible and registered. Registered are the bars that are available for delivery, backing the contracts. Eligible are people just holding their bars inside the vault. And the reason they're called eligible is that if they chose to sell it to an industrial buyer, they're already assayed and verified inside the COMEX chain of custody, but they're not for sale. So if you take all of the silver in the entire COMEX warehouse system, it's under It's under about 296 million ounces what India imported in 1 year. So when you talk about the frailty of the system, the biggest money in the world is accumulating gold and silver and using price as a tool of misdirection. It is the no look pass in basketball. People need to understand that misdirection is an incredibly pervasive tactic. In any game that you play, misdirection comes into play. Football, basketball, baseball, the squeeze bunt in baseball, the no look pass in basketball, the fake handoff over here, and the whole line goes that way, but the tight end sneaks out over here, the screen pass. Misdirection is in sports, in chess. You run your rook up this way so the queen can come around this way and misdirect your opponent. Check. And so it happens in finance too. And the biggest money in the world knows this. And so how do you misdirect the public? You do it by suppressing the paper price, allowing you to draw down the supplies. Remember I talked about he or she was closest to the information? That's exactly what's happening. These people are very close to the information. And so they are using the reality of what's coming as incentive to suppress price and rhetoric as motivation to accumulate the world's stockpile of this stuff before it disappears. Hence, the central banks buying more gold than at any time since 1967, drawdowns of the major exchanges and all of the available metal before anyone catches on. Where is it going? Who's buying it? The sophisticated money at the very top of the food chain who knows what's coming. It's just like this right here. President Roosevelt confiscated gold in 1933. That's the executive order. Most of the wealthy people sent their gold by steamship to the Swiss banks and to safe deposit boxes in 1932 or before April of 33 when he confiscated it, because they knew it was coming. They were told, hey, get your crap out of the country because we're going to confiscate. And to this day, huge amounts of pre-1933 gold coins are imported from the Swiss banks and others in Europe where they've been sitting since before World War II. And it's because they were told what is coming. And it's the same thing today. The big money knows what's coming, and they are using price as a tool to be able to reposition and drain the exchanges. So it's common, Mike, and you can see it by the actions of the biggest people in the world. Less their rhetoric, less the price. But do know this: if gold and silver's value was so underwhelming, who's draining it all? Where's it all going? And do understand this too. The dollar was so ridiculously strong this year, multi-decade highs in the dollar, right? The last time the dollar was this high, silver was under $5. So with that being said, it's held up remarkably well in the face of a very strong dollar. In fact, gold reached its all-time high in euros this year. Gold was up 11% in British pounds this year. In other words, the rest of the world is looking at gold at or near all-time highs. Not here in the US, because the dollar has been stupidly unrealistically high, unjustifiably high, which is skewing the value in dollar terms. But everywhere else in the globe, gold has been probably the best performing asset on the planet.
Wow. I know you shared that in the last episode that we talked about the performance of the dollar, how strong it's been, and how gold and silver has actually held up very, very strong against an inflated, I don't know, delusional dollar. And that's something that I think helps give people confidence in making those decisions that, hey, when Andy's telling me the strength of the precious metals, I think is going to far outweigh the dollar when the dollar collapses. Here's another question. This is something that you brought to the show, probably well over a year ago. I'm sure we've got new listeners since then. Can you explain to us what happened when gold became a tier 1 asset? Because I don't think a lot of people really understand what that truly means. And to me, that is a red flag. That is something that you should really just kind of pay attention to, because it has some weight behind it, and no pun intended, because gold weighs 19 times more than water. Gold is very heavy, precious metal. And when you hold, and silver too, when you hold physical silver in your hand, even one coin, you can feel that weight. It's truly amazing. It's a great feeling to have those precious metals in your hand. But what does it mean when they put gold up as a tier one asset? Could you explain that to the audience?
Yeah, and I'll also underscore what I was just saying about the big money front running. The big money getting closest to the information. So in 2017, Germany made a very big deal publicly about repatriating the gold that was being held in the US Federal Reserve vaults. And they said to the world, we want, the German Bundesbank said, send us back all our gold. We want it back. You can Google this, you'll find it. And we did. It took a long time to get it sent back, which was kind of weird, almost like they didn't have it. But I'll leave that for another discussion. Within a few weeks of that happening, the Bank of Austria, the Bank of Hungary, the Bank of Turkey, the Czech National Bank, the Bank of Poland, they all I said Hungary and Turkey. So they all started to repatriate their gold. Same from the New York Fed and the Bank of England. This was 2017. Give us back our gold. And it was weird because gold had been falling for the 6 years previously, from 2011 to 2017. It had been falling after being in a 10 or 11-year bull market. That was the beginning of a bear market cycle. And out of nowhere, these banks said, give us back our gold. The next year, 2018, those same banks bought more gold as a group than they did in the 60 years previously combined. Now, before I answer your question, what are they doing right now? Bought more gold than any time since 1956. So in 2017, they repatriate their gold, give it to me, we want it back, send it back, send it back. Then they go and buy more gold as a group than at any time in the previous 60 years. And then what happened in 2019? Those numbers are up 100%. And then the Bank of International Settlements, BIS, reclassifies gold as the only other tier one reserve asset in the world. It's as good as cash. There's only been one tier one asset on the planet since the end of World War II. That's been US dollars and treasuries. Now gold is classified the same way, the only other one. So when we talk front running, think about it. The banks out of nowhere repatriate their gold, then go on a massive buying spree for 2.5 years before the BIS makes this announcement. Do you think they were clued in to what's coming? Of course they were. So that's an example of big money being clued in and repositioning using price and rhetoric as a tool of misdirection. But when you talk about gold as being a tier one reserve asset, it's the only one in the world next to US dollars. It shows the end game for why these countries rather are going on a buying spree regardless of what price is doing, and going on a massive accumulation spree regardless of what price is doing. In fact, they want a price to be low and suppressed because it doesn't crowd them out of their trade. So everyone is talking about buying gold and silver instead of just us, the pimple on the elephant's ass. But once they've repositioned, that's when you'll see, once they're fully invested in the metal and no one wants to sell it for the bullshit prices that are quoted on COMEX or the London Metals Exchange, that's when it goes to the moon, after everyone has been repositioned before the herd catches on. And yeah, so its reclassification is probably the biggest event in my career. And but yet our media has done such a putrid job that I have never seen it ever in a mainstream media discussion. Just Google, is gold a tier one reserve asset? And it'll pop right up, bang. Most people wouldn't even have an inclination.
You talk about sending the gold back to Germany. I don't want to get too far off the subject here, but I believe that I just seen a documentary last week or the week before, where one of the first moves that the U.S. military made when they went into Kuwait was they went right into the palaces and they started grabbing things of value. And that's all I'm going to say. You guys read between the lines. but I believe they've also asked for some of those assets back as well. It's it's a gold grab, right? They go in, they
When
grab a lot of stuff.
the Ukraine sold 12 billion in gold recently to, as they put it, fund the war effort. Who do you think got that gold? Where do you think it went? Um, where did Saddam Hussein's gold go? Where did Gaddafi's gold go? And when you realize that gold is going to be a very significant part of what's coming next, um, where do you think all that gold went? Who bought the 12 billion in gold? Was it given to the US? Here, thank you for all your help. So yeah, there's no question, but that it has a very significant role, and that governments do desperate things to accumulate it. So none of that surprises me one bit.
I mean, it's obvious to me. I mean, we've seen the Speaker of the House use insider trading with her husband on technology.
Thank God the former Speaker of the
The
House.
former speaker, thank you. The former speaker, thank you for correcting me on that.
And thank God for that too.
Yes, there's all kinds of insider information and trading, and that's what Andy's trying to tell you. The big money already knows what's going on. There's already that insider information that's being shared with big money and these countries that are out there stockpiling gold, stockpiling silver. If you guys didn't know this, silver is used in a lot of our technology today. Cell phones use it, computers, there's chips, all kinds of different technology uses that silver. Technology uses a lot of precious metals, and I wasn't aware of it until some of the research that I did being part of Miles Franklin. There's other precious metals out there besides just gold and silver that's used for technology today. So it's an asset that countries are stockpiling up for that reason. We talked last episode about China stockpiling aluminum and gold and silver and petro and all this other stuff. It's kind of like they are preemptively preparing for what's about to happen, and that's what we're trying to do with our audience, is educate you guys to get ahead of the herd, because once the herd starts, it's going to be hard to keep up. Which brings me to something I'd like to give you an opportunity to speak about your company, which is Miles Franklin. And Miles Franklin is licensed through the state of Minnesota. And I want you to talk about it because I think it's so important for people to know what kind of integrity Andy has, what kind of integrity Miles Franklin has, the reputation that you spent 30 years building. And I think it's important for people to get to know that, because there's not a lot of companies out there with that type of integrity. There's not a lot of companies out there that have put their asses on the line and really said, we're going to do it the right way. We're not going to just be an overnight company selling this stuff. We want to do it the right way. And I think you've really built a career of doing that, Andy. So if you wouldn't mind explaining a little bit of your story, how you got started, and why it's so important to you, Andy, and Miles Franklin, to have those licenses and to really be top shelf, in my opinion.
I appreciate that very much. We've been around since 1989, 1990. We've done 8 billion in sales. We've never had a customer complaint ever. We're a small family company. My father and I started it together on a wing and a prayer. In 1989, my father's middle name is Miles. He's been retired for about 20 years, but he definitely took the leap of faith, borrowed $60,000 from his friend with the middle name of Franklin, best friend since high school. And in a one-room office the size of a big closet, we started a company, and we're the most unlikely cast of characters to ever succeed. Subsequently, we have done 8 billion in sales without a complaint. We are one of only 27 US Mint authorized resellers. We have worldwide exclusives with Brinks. I pinch myself every day to think, how the hell did we do this? And how did we get to where we are without aggravating someone enough to file a complaint with the regulatory agency or a nasty remark on Google? And that's not to say we haven't screwed up. Everyone does, but I think a man is defined, or a woman, really, anyone, a human, by how they how they deal with problems. And I've told everyone that ever works for me that a problem is nothing but an opportunity to strengthen a relationship. We all make mistakes, but this is one where I think, um, you know, to me, we have the best reputation in the United States as a precious metals company. But all of those accolades don't really mean anything to the state of Minnesota. Now, even though I moved to Florida almost 2 years ago, where we've had a satellite office for a decade, we left our corporate entity in Minnesota because it is the only state in America that regulates what is a federally non-regulated precious metals industry. We are licensed and bonded. Most companies in the United States, the majority of them, almost all of them, will not do business in the state of Minnesota because of that licensing and bonding requirement that is onerous. And if you only have to be licensed in one state, post a large surety bond with a personal guarantee, and spend a day doing continuing education and compliance and have to pass a test basically every single year, most companies say, you know what, we'll just work with every other state but Minnesota. It holds us to a higher standard. And I appreciate your kind words. I'm very proud of what we've achieved. So yeah, it's been a nice ride, and looking forward to hopefully another 30 years where, you know, my kids can take over for where my father and I started in 1989. But yeah, we're happy to have you part of the team, Mike, and you know, people with integrity and honesty and patriotism and all the things that you would want when you talk about a company that, you know, believes in what this country stands for. We don't sell precious metals as an alternative to what this country stands for. We sell it because, unfortunately, the politicians that are steering the ship are leading us down a path that, if you are not a contrarian, then I think you'll end up being a victim. And I look at gold and silver always has as wealth. And that's how I've always sold it. We've always sold it as wealth. I never bought it because I thought the sky was falling. Over the last 3 years, I've become very concerned and borderline frightened for the world my kids are growing up in. And I don't think owning gold and silver has ever been more important. For me, it used to just be a form of wealth and savings. But now I realize that, you know, there are very few things that have stood the test of time, 5,000 plus years, as wealth. And when you talk about a world of increased liability, of counterparty risk, of subjectivity, you know, gold and silver being the only assets that are not simultaneously someone else's liability. There's no counterparty risk in it. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. So I appreciate the kind words. We're very, very happy to have you as someone on the team, and look forward to seeing what 2023 brings. And again, I do want to come here every week, Wednesday, if we can, and keep bringing information to the public and see where it takes us.
Absolutely. You know, folks, Andy doesn't have to do this. He's in Florida, for crying out loud. He's in a beautiful state with beautiful weather. This is a passion of Andy's. He's been podcasting, correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, but I think it's somewhere around 8 years. Haven't you been kind of podcasting for around 8 years?
Yeah,
You
about
know?
that.
Yeah, and so this is something that Andy doesn't have to do. And let me tell you, I get on the phone with Andy. He's busy, man. He carves out time, and I do appreciate you carving out time for us here at LWN. But he's on many other platforms, Liberty and Finance. Just
My schedule for today. You can see, I mean, it's booked solid. So I don't have time anywhere. So,
yeah,
but it's important that I'm here, and I'm happy to be here. And it's a labor of love. And again, I just appreciate your enthusiasm, and the people who listen to your show are some of the best people I've ever talked to. And so we're just happy to be part of it, and we'll continue to be part of it. And I think I think you're doing a heck of a job at getting the word out to the public, and we're just happy to be part of what you're doing. And I'll continue to ride along with you shotgun and see where this crazy road leads to.
Amen. Well, folks, if you'd like to reach out to us, you can call us at 1-800-822-8080, or you can reach out to me through my personal email at lwnreloaded@gmail.com. I'd love an opportunity to earn your business. And it's something that I am passionate about, because as patriots, the battlefield is massive and there's so many parts to it, and there's so many things. We can't all do it all. Andy is just one part of the puzzle. He's a great patriot trying to help other people out, and so that's one part of it. And then of course we've got getting engaged at your local level, and all the other stuff that we talk about here at LWN. This is part of the battlefield, and I just want to make sure that you guys can go out there and protect yourselves with the information that Andy brings to you. Protect yourself from the things that are coming, and don't listen to the foolishness out there, because it is coming, and you have an opportunity right now to make that change. So please do that. 1-800-822-8080 or lwnreloaded@gmail.com. Andy, thank you for your time. I know you're a busy man.
I'll try to jump on with you this evening, but if you do call that main number, make sure you say LWN sent me, or just ask to be transferred to better yet, to you. I think there's no better way for your listeners to enjoy the experience than to do it directly with you. But anyways, Mike, it's a pleasure, buddy. I'll see you hopefully tonight, and for sure next Wednesday as well.
All right. Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it.
See you, bud. Yeah, you take care.
All right, folks. Like I said, I have talked to several of you on the phone and through email, but then we get on the phone and we've had some great conversations. I've had a great opportunity to personally meet a lot of you folks, and I really appreciate that. You get to meet me on a personal level as well. It's not this sales pitch that you're thinking. I don't get you on the phone and try to pressure you into doing something that you don't want. I'm there really to answer questions for you. If I don't know the answers to those questions, which I don't know all the answers, Miles Franklin has got an amazing team. I got Justin who helps me to answer all those questions. Just call me up, send me an email. Let's have a conversation. Tell me some of your concerns. Tell me the things that are disturbing you in this economy, and ask for my help, and I'll do my very best to either get you some physical precious metals that we can ship right to your home, very secured, insured, gets to you in a reasonable amount of time. Or if you have bigger things that you really want to work on, like your pension or your 401k, I've been dealing with quite a few people in the last couple of weeks with those issues, with their 401k, with their pensions. Some of the things they're easy to deal with, and some of them are a little more complicated, but we get through it. And there have been several people that have reached out to me, and we were able to help secure them in a place where they've got a little bit of that security blanket, and they put their hard-earned money in a place that I think is a lot better than the stock market, a lot better than the central banks, or under your mattress. So if you're willing to give me a shot at that, I'm willing to take the time and to get to know you and help you on that personal level. So reach out to me, 1-800-822-8080, and let them know that LW sent you, or you can send me an email at lwnreloaded@gmail.com. With that being said, God bless each and every one of you. Thanks for joining us tonight. Like, subscribe, share this video out, and we'll catch you on the next one. Liberty Warrior Nation, if you missed it last time, it's back. The biggest bed sheet sale ever. The Giza Dream Sheets, the bed sheets as low as $29.99 using promo code LWN. You could save up to 50% off. Don't forget, Mike Lindell and My Pillow have some of the best products out there. He has My Coffee, My Slippers, He's got bedding for dogs. He's got the bath towel sets. Lots of great products out there for every patriot. And if you'd like to support Mike Lindell in return, supporting him also supports me here at LWN. Like I said, use promo code LWN. You could save up to 50% off the Giza bed sheets, $29.99.
Hoping for a sincere performance, but open to finding the moment, to finding out where I'm headed now. Looking for a sign of disaster, so I can make it there faster. I'm weighing the consequences out. I can see in all directions. It's all open to interpretation, but I see colors that are breaking from the other side, the other side. When I make mountains out of summer trails, when I how you can blend in with the crowd. I'm so scared, so damn afraid to look. I'm so sick of talking. I'm wearing the words out, words out. Out to